Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to have you here for the last workshop of the Morning Health Talk series in Italy. I am Giusy Esposito. I am a researcher of BioCheckup SRL. I'm here to introduce you the company and the event of today. So let me show my slides. Okay. Can you see the slides? Okay. So BioCheckup, just a moment. Okay. BioCheckup is a small company based in Naples, and it is an Italian partner of EIT Health and the EIT Health InnoStars networks since 2020. BioCheckup provides professional consulting, quality control, and assistance in diagnostic imaging, especially in radiological and nuclear medicine evaluations of imaging studies. BioCheckup also promotes research activities in healthcare and supports clinical decision-making processes with the development of advanced technological solutions. Recently, BioCheckup established an IT infrastructure named the BCU Imaging Biobank. The BCU Imaging Biobank is dedicated to the collection of diagnostic images and related data in order to share them to the scientific communities and promote the research in the field of biomedical research. The BCU Imaging Biobank in 2021 was approved by BBM-RAI, the research infrastructure of biobanking and biomolecular resources. And despite this, there are still some open challenges to overcome, such as the standardization of data derived from different sources, the issues related to privacy and the legal issues, and also the huge efforts to improve the technological equipment. For this reason, we organized this workshop regarding the biobanking for patients' involvement. This is the last workshop of a series, as I said, a series of 3 morning health talks funded by EIT Health and EIT Health InnoStars. The first one was organized by Arter, another Italian partner of EIT Health, on the 3rd of November in Bologna. The second one was organized by SILAB SDN yesterday in Naples. And this is the topic of today, focused on biobanking for patients' involvement. We discussed this topic from 3 different points of view. The first one is the point of view of biobanks and of biobankers. The second one is the point of view of the hospitals, and especially the role of the hospital in, for example, in patient data collection. And the third one is the point of view of the patients and of the professionals who work to improve their involvement. This is the agenda of today. We have 3 speakers. And at the end after the intervention of our speakers, we have a moment for answers and questions, and also for a discussion. So I would thank the EIT Health and EIT Health InnoStars to support us during the organization and for funding the event. And I leave the virtual floor to Professoressa Maria Luisa Lavitrano. She is a professor of pathology at the University of Milano Bicocca, and she is the director of EMM-RAI and the director of Italian node of BBM-RAI. She will introduce our speaker, and she will moderate the event. So enjoy the event and enjoy the breakfast. Thank you. Professoressa, can you hear us? Okay.
Indeed, yes. Thank you very much, Giusy, for this kind introduction. Welcome to all the participants. I apologize for not being with you today, but on Tuesday I was tested positive for SARS-CoV-2. Therefore, I'm have COVID right now, and also I apologize for my voice today. But it's still a pleasure to be with you at least by remote and to participate to this very nice event. To setting the scene, I prepared a few slides for you, and then we will start with the presentation from the panelist. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So the topic of today is biobanking for patients' involvement. And this is in the frame of this morning health talks related to rethinking the future of healthcare. And therefore, to set in the scene, I will talk a little bit about the context, the appropriateness of care and sustainability of healthcare, the evidence-based and personalized medicine and precision medicine, the biobanks, the healthcare integrated biobanks, and the patient involvement. Just to give you a few numbers, and the numbers related to European diseases are really big numbers. Focusing on cancer, we can say that every day 4,000 Europeans die for cancer, and by 2030, the global burden is expected to grow to 21.7 million new cancer cases and 13 million cancer deaths. And the cost for cancer in Europe is about 200 billion per year. And available estimates suggest that between 38 and 75% of the patients are unresponsive to drugs, representing an enormous economic burden. Therefore, there is the need for a long-term vision that will provide sustainability of healthcare system through initiatives that are capable of improving competitiveness and quality of public services and people's quality of life. And this is the mission of health sciences, not only focus, of course, on cancer, but on all the pathologies, which is create better health outcomes for citizen patients tomorrow than the one that we have today. And this means also going towards precision medicine. Precision medicine means more effective clinical treatment, more precise diagnosis, and the possibility to have a prognosis, an accurate prognosis. Now, to better health what are the needs for the better health outcomes? We need to change the health practice, and to change the health practice, we need to adapt guidelines. To adapt guidelines, we need to establish evidence. Evidence can be established by conducting practice-changing studies. This means to generate and use data, and also means to have the support of high-quality infrastructure. Of course, to change health practice, there is also the need, not only there is the need of scientific evidence, but also we need to take care of the cost. But what is about? Is about studying novel treatment and diagnostic options for patients and to have availability of diverse data sets, clinical pathological variables, medical images, genomic and other omics, experimental models, drugs, clinical outcomes, cost effectiveness. And the data are of different data types: radiology, pathology image, and derived data, molecular profiling data, like all the omics on a human and model system, functional readout data, like the data from drug response, and so on. And the data sources are data generated in the health research, and this is the easy part to find, and data from the health system that are used for research. And this is a little bit more hard to collect. Often a combination of these data sources are needed for our research. And definitely for the advancement and implementing of precision medicine, what we need in different type of disease, from cancer to rare and pediatric disease to COVID-19 and infectious disease and any other disease, what is needed is to have the availability of samples and data. Samples and data are the two faces of the same coin. Data are produced mostly out of the samples. And to speeding up the research process and to turn the theory into practice, actually the European, at the European level, several infrastructure has been established, and what is called European Research, the European Strategy Forum on Research Infrastructure, established a number of infrastructure in the healthcare system that can cover the entire workflow of the research, from the bench research, from the target identification, the target validation, through the discovery, development, and phase 3 trials. And all the infrastructures are facilities that provide resources and services for research communities to conduct research and foster innovation. You can see in the slide, in the left part, the name and the logos of all the infrastructure that are approved by the European Strategy for Research Infrastructure and are marked as landmark infrastructure. Very important about this infrastructure is BBMRI. BBMRI is the Biobanking and Biomolecular Research Infrastructure, which is a pan-European distributed research infrastructure, including 18 member states, with more than, and listed more than 600 biobanks, quality grade, with about 2,000 collections. And the mission is to develop personalized medicine and to make new diagnostic and treatment possible for the benefit of European citizens, and also to facilitate the access and interoperability of quality-defined human health disease-relevant biological resources, including associated data, in an efficient and ethical and legal compliant manner. Italy, BBMRI gained the ERIC status. ERIC means European Research Infrastructure Consortium. So gained the ERIC status and is operational since 2013. As I said, is a distributed research infrastructure, and Italy has been one of the founding members of the BBMRI ERIC. The national node, BBMRI Italy, of which I'm the director since the beginning, since 2013, includes 97 biobanks. 46 of these are quality grade biobanks. These biobanks are located throughout Italy, in 19 universities, 33 IRCCS, and 45 hospitals. We serve 290 research groups, and we actively collaborate with 14 patient associations and ASO Biotech, which is the Association of Biotech Industries. Why biobanks are so important? Biobanks collect, process, and store and distribute biological materials and related data to research organizations. These biospecimens and data are used by scientists to learn more about human disease, their causes, and their effect, and to develop better prevention measures, better diagnostic tests, and better therapies. Biobanks and biobanking research plays an increasingly important role in healthcare research and delivery as health systems become more patient-centered and medicine become more personalized. And biobanks are actually at the interface between patients and medical research. The biobanking process guarantees the collection and use of biological material in compliance with ethical regulatory principles, as well as the quality of the samples through implementation of SOPs. But biobanks do not operate in isolation. They exist within a diverse ecosystem of stakeholders, which includes the public, patients, healthcare workers, scientists, governments, founders, healthcare providers, ethicists, regulators, and others. And there is a growing acceptance and appreciation of the value that patient advocacy organization, and the public can bring as stakeholders in biobanking, and more generally in research. In particular, the role of patient in biobanking is changing from being seen simply as donors to actual collaborators in the design, development, and the running of biobanks. Therefore, the importance of active, early, and sustained engagement and involvement of patient representatives in biobanks will become increasingly relevant. Directly involving patients and the public also in the shaping both the organization and delivery of healthcare services is central to current health reform agendas around the world, and especially in the US and UK, but also now in Europe. And realigning public services based on evidence from service users' experience and design with and by the public rather than on their behalf is challenging national healthcare system. And in the development of personalized medicine, biobanks and biobanking research playing an increasingly important role. There are studies confirming that the integration of biobanking at all levels of disease-specific epidemiological and applied biomedical research and healthcare increase progress into health research and decrease cost for both clinical trials and daily healthcare. And this is what we call healthcare integrating biobank. And I think that the new perspective is to make a switch of the healthcare for the patients, with the healthcare with the patients, with a participatory approach, seeing the patients, as a shift of the view with the patient, seen from recipients to partners of research, with an empowerment program in which all the stakeholders are involved, to co-produce tools and good practices in collaborative spaces towards what we call scientific citizenship. And with this, I thank you for your attention, and I stop sharing my slides, and I'll be happy also to receive your question at the end of the presentations. And also, it is my pleasure to introduce Peppino Mirabelli, who is researcher at the Santo Bono Pausilipon Hospital in Naples, and he will talk about biobank's experience. Peppino, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Prof. Lavitrano, for your presentation. Okay, I'm waiting for my slides. Okay. So, these presentations will deal with the biobank experience in patient involvement in biobanking. First of all, we have to consider that the field of biobanking or biobanks is a hot topic in the scientific literature. As you can see, there is a growing number of scientific publications regarding biobanking. But why? Why it is, this is a picture showing you a significant example of good biobanking, that is the Cancer Genome Atlas. As you know, we have 33 different cancer types in this catalog, but one of the most important things is that 11,000 of patients participated to this research program. This is very, very important for us because the Cancer Genome Atlas provided not only 28 significant papers published in leading scientific journals, but also we have a digital platform for using the data of the TCGA. So, what are the steps for involving a patient in Biobank? This picture was realized by the Italian network for fighting cancers that is called Alleanza contro il Cancro. This is a working group of biobankers. In this case, it is represented a patient involved in the biobanking process. The first step is the informed consent. So the informed consent is the first step that the patient has when it is involved in a research program. In the case of Biobank, we have to involve the patient not only in a specific research program, but also in future activities that will be done using his or her samples. Indeed, after the patient approves to be engaged, then we can take some tissues not useful for the diagnostic process. So these tissues are used only for research purposes and will be used, for example, for generating omics data. But these data are digital, in a digital format. This data can be reused, can be exploited not only for the specific research project, but can be used by other research activities. And I believe that most of the researchers in these rooms use the open platform with the digital data for producing additional scientific activities. Oh, okay. So yesterday we talked a lot about the value of data, but this data or the modalities of data are growing because we don't know only the data regarding the omics science or what we can produce in the laboratory, but now it is important to know also data coming from the real world. So data provided by biosensors. A biosensor can be for example, a smartwatch. Okay, and these data are providing a lot of opportunities for precision health, digital clinical trials. Marco Aiello is an expert in this field, and he's one of the first researchers that I know that approved the idea of digital clinical trials. It is a very challenging experience. Hospital at home, also pandemic surveillance, digital twins, and virtual health coach. So this picture is taken from this article published in Nature Medicine last September. And the discussion about the use and the collection of this data is an argument of intense debate in the scientific literature, but also for bioethicists. How biobanks are evolving? We know that they are able to connect the research world with the clinical care world. But now, informatics has a critical role for the next generation biobanking. So the data and the biobanks are generating an innovative platform allowing researchers not only to take samples, but also to use virtual samples. And this data, this field will, I believe that in the next year will be very, very interested to be followed up. So, about the informed consent. Engaging patient and public partners is becoming recognized as an integral for event for researchers when designing clinical studies. But the informed also needs to be freely given, purpose-specific, unambiguous, given by a statement or by a clear act, distinguishable from other matters, and written in a clear and a plain language. So, when I talk with patients in our hospital or with their caregivers, it's not very easy to explain what is a biobank. This is the first issue. What is a biobank? Why I have to provide you additional samples for research? And then this is the first issue that the biobankers has to face. The second are the perceived barriers that have a patient. My privacy. So, will be my data manipulated by you? Will be my data provided to third parties? The attitudes. So, it's the patient in a moment that is in a hospital has things to personal health, okay? And then he may feel our questions as wasting his time. Why I have to talk with the researchers in this moment? I have to talk with the clinicians about my health status. This is a problem regarding the educational of our society. What we can teach to our students, but also with the public. So we have to inform the patient for the possible benefits in participating to a biobanking program. The benefits may be for helping the science or societies, for helping others, but also to have personal benefits. Finally, what is able, the best things that we have to do is that the patient has to trust the clinicians. So trust the consent. So I have to be sure that this clinician is my reference person when I'm giving the sample. In this context, the BBMRI network is helpful for our biobanking activities, especially regarding this initiative that is the European Biobank Week. But it is only one example of scientific disseminations regarding biobanking, because this week is dedicated not only to the event for biobanking, but also for collaborating with the patient association and also for disseminate the culture of biobanking by website or social media network. Now, currently, I work in a children's hospital, and biobanking with children is a challenging experience, very, very challenging. The first problem is reconsent, but also reconsent is not the right word in this case, because the children do not provide a real consent. When he will be adult, he will provide us the consent for using effectively his sample for additional study. So the second issue is the long-term outcome. Cioè, a biobank for children has to engage a patient for a long time period. Okay? Not only for having additional information about his or her health status, but also for reaching the consent when he will be adult. Another problem is that most of pediatric disorders are uncommon. So in this case, funding opportunities are fewer respect to other pathologies considered as big killers, for example, for colon cancer, lung cancer, that are neoplasia of the adulthood. In the case of, for example, of cancer related to the central nervous systems or hematopoietic systems, these are considered in the childhood very rare pathologies. Also, children are unfamiliar with research, with the researchers. They don't know who we are, what we have to do, and their familiar are very, very protective with them. Final issue is to have samples from healthy children, because we cannot consider the children as little adults. They have a metabolic activities, physiological activities specific for their age. So we need age-related normal controls and from different ethnicities, not only Caucasian, but also Africa, Asia, and so on. So looking when I was in the web, I found this service provided by this society called the CIRA. This is a society providing services for helping the researchers to explain his activities, as well as to explain what is a biobank in a simple language, understandable for children, okay? And also for their families. This is one modality to engage the patient. So this picture is what is my idea for biobanking with children, where we have to go. The first thing is we have to enhance the knowledge of the omic landscape about children disorders. The second, for doing this, we have to dispose of biosamples collected and preserved following international guidelines and standard operating procedures. The second is to allow the collection of healthy samples from children at different ages and with different ethnicities. The third, improve children's engagement and empowerment in pediatric research, respecting current ethical and legal regulation. For this topic, today we have the opportunity to discuss with Professor Lavitrano, that coordinates also the ELSI group of BBMRI, and she is a leading expert in this sense. Then, collect and provide access to longitudinal health data from childhood to adulthood and mediate for reconsent procedures. Finally, promote the realization of clinical studies of childhood disease by data sharing and reuse according to FAIR principles and favoring public-private partnership. So, okay. This was my last picture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mirabelli. Thank you, Peppino. This was a very nice presentation, focus on the importance of biobanks in medical research, and in particular with the focus on pediatric biobanking. Are there questions from the audience? Please stay at the podium. And also, I don't know whether there are questions also from...
There's just a question.
From remote.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So
can you please present yourself?
Yes, sorry. So I'm Sophie Grell. I work at Hospital Clínic and Barcelona Institute for Global Health Research in the patient involvement and citizen science unit. So I wanted to ask you, can you elaborate a bit more in your hospital? So what type of activity do you do? Well, I'm especially interested to learn from your practices in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm working with the Santobono Children's Hospital from just a few months. Okay. Previously, I was a researcher and a biobanker working in the CLAB SDN Institute. I was involved in there was the supervisor of the SDN Biobank. So what I have in this experience with children that I believe that the most important things to consider is the engagement of both children and parents. So we are trying to set up a group where nurses and psychologists will assist the clinicians in the moment of asking for the engagement in the biobank. So in this moment, we are trying this approach. It is, we have people say yes, so they want to help us to do research. They want to that the children's samples can be used for research. The problem is when the children reach adult, when the children become adult. This is the critical issue, because we need a long-term monitoring systems. So we have to monitor it, the children and her health status, and then when children is adult, we have to recontact him or her. This is another problem, because probably the young adult prefer not to remember what was his disease, especially when this was a cancer. So these are basically the problem that we are now dealing. And this biobank is in the phase of the setting up. Okay? Thank you for your question.
Did Peppino answer to your question sufficiently? You want to comment? I cannot hear you. Sorry.
Sorry, I was speaking without the mic. No, I was saying the answer was pretty clear, so thank you very much. So the nurses and the psychologist at the moment of the informed consent.
With both parents.
Yes, yes. So they have this specific role of further explaining what is the biobank.
Because most of these children are hospitalized for different days in our hospital. So we have the time to talk with the children and parents. Yeah. This is an opportunity for us.
So you have the nurse and the psychologist within your team?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Also for the engagement in the clinical trials, because most of these children are engaged for profit or non-profit clinical trials for caring the disease, especially in the case of children not responding to routine treatments.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Ella.
May I comment? Thank you very much for what you said, Peppino. I wish to add something. I think that it's very important to have a specific training also for researchers and clinicians. I'm sorry. And together with the caregivers and the patients, especially in the case of pediatric patients, because I mean, there is really the need for to understand how to approach the patients, how to inform the patients, and also how to return results in case, and also how to return what are called the findings that are not expected, unexpected finding.
Absolutely.
So I think that all this should be included in the framework of the healthcare system, the training, I mean.
Yeah. This would which would be the ideal things to do.
So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. We can have more questions at the end of the session. And now it's my pleasure to invite to the podium Dean O'Brien, who is the head of public relations of Donate Your Data Foundation, and he comes from Poland. So Dean, welcome, and welcome to Napoli.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Professoressa Lavitrano, and Mr. Mirabelli for your presentation as well. As I mentioned, I've said to a few of you already, excuse me, I had COVID a few weeks ago and still catching up with my breath. As I mentioned to a few of you already, it's fantastic being in a room with people who wake up thinking about medical data and how it can help us and how we can leverage it, because this is what I do with my time every day. So what I would like to do is talk a little bit more about the technological and legislative parts about biobanking and the data surrounding it. Of course, as we talked about, biobanking is just exploding in importance and popularity, and it's becoming a very important tool for, as we said, personalized medicine, and even, you know, real-time data processing and real-time solutions, giving solutions to patients that are tailor-made to them, be it genomics or their medical history, and being able to actually provide tailor-made healthcare solutions. This saves time, it improves outcomes, and this is where Europe has said we want to go. Researchers, however, need the right data, and they need it at the right time. And this is, of course, the big issue that we have in Europe and across the world is access to medical data. And this is no different. I talked a little bit yesterday about medical data in terms of the context of hospitals, but with biobanking, it makes no difference. It's the same thing. So we have, you know, the raw data, let's say, you have unprocessed samples, you have the processed data, let's say, and then there's supplementary data as well, clinical annotations, et cetera. So there is a ton of data that is being produced by biobanks. And as we saw, it's only going to grow, and it will continue to grow. Some of the issues, other than access, quality assurance, of course, is huge. And being able to match the clinical data with the samples accrued. As you mentioned as well, once we have pediatric biobanking samples, when they reach 18, then we have to reconsent, as you said. But again, you have to have a way to contact this person. Maybe it's been years, you know, and being able to match a sample from 10 years ago to the clinical data of someone today is a challenge. Other issues, there's a lack of standardization. Even within the terminology used in these clinical annotations between countries, obviously between regions, there's just no standardization. And this makes interoperability and connection between systems very difficult. And this is really what we're trying to fix in terms of what I'm doing. And for those of you who weren't there yesterday, very briefly, I'm part of an organization that is creating a international medical data donation program based on consent. So we took the GDPR and the Data Governance Act, and we responded directly to that by saying we will create a consent-based system where any patient in Europe is able to give informed consent digitally. Right now, it's done all on paper, on a form, in a hospital, generally speaking. There are a few digital systems, but 99% is done on paper. It must be scanned. It has to be put in their medical record. And it's a very slow and difficult process. And actually, as I mentioned yesterday, the number one, let's say, complaint that we have from patients or reason why they don't want to give consent when we have our physical presence in hospitals is, I don't have time. Now, obviously, it's a little bit different with biobanking and you know, because you are sitting there with your doctor and with your team, a psychologist as well. And, you know, so it's a little bit different, but at the same time, we have to make this process as easy and smooth as possible. People, no offense, I can't count myself in here. We tend to be lazy. We don't like processes that take up too much of our time, and especially when we don't have the education to understand the importance of what we're being asked, it's just pushed aside. And we see this in the hospitals as we're currently collecting consent for medical data. People don't fully understand what's going to happen with that data. They don't understand that it could save lives. They don't understand that it could help them even. And so this education really is fundamental for people to be able to understand the importance of what is being asked of them. From a technological standpoint, there's a couple of different approaches. Obviously, there's a more centralized approach where each biobank is kind of its own island and entity, and they have their own procedures and perhaps even their own formats. Now, while this makes it a little bit easier to change data structures on the fly or upgrade your system or this sort of thing, there's no data portability and there's no interoperability, two things that the European Union has said we must have. On the other hand, as one of the speakers spoke about yesterday, there's a federated approach and a decentralized approach, which personally I'm quite a big fan of. It de-silos repositories, same with the biobanks. The issue is it requires standardization and synchronization, and standardization is obviously an issue in the medical world. I'm a little bit newer to the medical world. I've had exposure to it, but this is my first real job within it. And to be frank, coming from the technological universe, it's quite mind-blowing to me that we have all the tools, we have standard operating procedures internationally, they're just not being implemented. And so this decentralized federated approach is the way to go, but it requires the human element to be navigated and overcome. And as I'm sure we all know, the human element is often the most hard part. In the UK, for example, the BCCTB, the Breast Cancer Campaign Tissue Bank, they took a federated approach. There were only 2 or 3 locations involved, so it's a very small sample size. But what happened was one of the biobanks decided to change their database infrastructure, and then they lost the ability to talk to the others. The other one just didn't have the time or the resources or perhaps the talent to be able to fully integrate into the API to communicate between this small network of biobanks, and basically the ability to do cross-biobank research was broken, just because of one update in one biobank. And so while we have this federated and decentralized approach and we have all the technologies, it requires massive synchronization to be able to continue that communication on a regular basis. So for me, I think it's quite clear that the federated approach is the way to go. We are Europe. We are quite federal in that sense. And I think that for large-scale data searching and analysis through interconnected biobanks across Europe, which is really the way to go, and across the world, because as you said, we need different ethnicities, we need different types of data. And as I mentioned yesterday, when it comes to AI, a lack of representation and bias in the data is absolutely going to kill the innovation that can come from it. And it's problematic for the outcomes of people who are not white European Caucasian males in their 30s to 40s who are more typically going to be represented in the data as of right now. So from a technological standpoint, we have some issues, we have some challenges, but as I said, we have all of the tools and the technologies able to solve these. So for example, as we're talking about informed consent, which is so important, especially when we're talking about your actual physical, samples of your own body, and they're going somewhere and you don't know what's happening with them. Who are they going to run DNA analysis without asking? Like all kinds of questions that are serious questions, and I think they're valid questions from patients. And so even we've had discussions with our medical community, even Poland, and when we were setting up our consent-based system, there were medical lawyers who said, we're not even sure that informed consent exists, to be honest with you, because these questions are so complex that we would need to sit down with a patient for a few weeks to fully explain the whole system and what it means. And so the educational aspect is very important, but from a technological aspect, we have the tools. And so, as was mentioned earlier, you need a specific consent. It needs to be for that purpose. It needs to be, it can't just be a generalized informed consent for medical data, et cetera. And our system, actually, we are putting in a module for biobanking informed consent specifically for that purpose, where a patient who is going to donate their medical data can say, I would like to give my generalized medical data, but I would also like to give any biobanking samples that are attached to my file or my record. Going further than that, from a technological standpoint, this may be a little bit too far in the future, but I made a proposal actually to the European Commission a few years ago when they were asking for citizen proposals for technological solutions. And on a very more general side of things, I made a proposal for a technological solution, which would probably be in the form of an app, because we all have our phones now, where you can actually give specific consent for different types of data throughout Europe. And this could be marketing data, for example, emissions data from cars, which will in the future be tracked. by location. They'll have a tracker in your car. They'll know exactly how many emissions are coming out of your car for maybe tax purposes or other things, but also for research and climate research and things like that. Now, for me personally, if the government is going to track my car, I would like to give permission to that, and I would like to be able to opt out of that. But anyway, so with the technologies we have, the phones that everyone has in their pockets, as well as other emerging technologies like blockchain, we actually have the ability to very provably, without question, say someone has given their consent or not, in permanence and with recurring ability to contact this person. So without going very deep into the technological aspects, we have something coming forward which is called self-sovereign identity, which basically allows someone to share portions of their data, but not all of it, with any service. So I could go to my bank and say, yes, of course you need my birth date, you need my full name, you need maybe my, whatever data, but you don't need everything. You don't need my medical data. You don't need my phone location data, these sorts of things. And so actually we have this technology now, which the European Commission is currently in the process of experimenting in the JRC in ISPRA. And they're working on this, on how we can have a system where any European can give a portional consent or a selective consent to their data, be it marketing or medical or things like that. And what's really exciting about that is that it's tied to your identity card and the EIT's identity verification program, which means it's permanently tied to you, but it's encrypted and it's anonymized, and only the person that you give access and allowance to can actually see who you are. But your identifier remains the same. So what's really exciting about that is down the road, you have a young child, they also will have identity cards, et cetera, and when they hit 18, you will be able to go directly back to them based on this unique identifier and ask for that consent again. For me, I see it as a part of an app that we would all have on our phone, but the European Commission moves slowly, as we know, and maybe it will happen, maybe it will not. But the fact of the matter is, when it comes to data, consent, and biobanking, we have all of the tools and technology we need. We have a lot of recommendations, including from some of the organizations represented today, on how we can have standard operating procedures and how we can do this. We just need the will to put it all together. What's really interesting, and I'm trying to be conscious of time. When did I start? 10 minutes? 5 minutes?
You have time, 10 minutes.
Okay. Just want to make sure, because I get excited and talking and then I don't even look at the clock. So moving onwards, though, what's really interesting that's happening right now is on the legislative point. So we had GDPR, which kind of set the stage for privacy, data ownership, you're in charge, et cetera. Fantastic, a little bit complicated, a little bit hard to navigate, but at the end of the day, it is the leading legislation for privacy in the world, and I absolutely love it. Then we had the Data Governance Act, which added upon this, gave us new rules for medical data. It created third-party trust organizations who can become intermediaries between citizens and data receivers or people who are going to be using the data. And then the European Health Data Space came out, which is not currently enacted, but will be coming out soon. And all of a sudden, this consent-based system actually changed to where they said, well, if you're using it for certain research, it's okay, you don't actually need consent, which is a little bit against, and I mentioned yesterday, I've had these talks with the European Commission, DG Santé, DG Connect, and they have very differing approaches. And there's kind of this irony, like this almost inside joke where they're like, yeah, we understand we put out two very differing thoughts here, like your data is yours and we have data privacy and it's your right. But on the other hand, in this area, you don't actually have privacy or consent or anything like this. So it's really interesting what will happen even from a biobanking point of view. Biobanking samples were not specifically included in that. However, the legislation talks about secondary use of data attached to medicine in general. And so we may actually now be in a position where we have to get consent for the sample itself, but anything that happens with the data, there's actually no consent required, potentially with the EHDS. So I want to be very clear that it's very opaque, this legislation. We don't fully understand the implications. The lawyers are still discussing it. It hasn't gone to the council yet for vote. But based on my discussions with the European Commission, obviously they can't be very straightforward with things, but it seems like this is where we're going. It will be enacted, and this will be our new legislation in terms of the European health data space. What's nice in that is we benefit from enhanced right to access and receive a copy of our data, portability. We can go, anywhere in Europe and have our records transferred between hospitals, and this is all fantastic. But from the consent side of things, it really does change perhaps our understanding and approach when it comes to biobanking as well. So for me, it's going to be very interesting to see this collision of the European health data space and biobanking, what that's actually going to mean. And I think it will actually mean flexibility in how we approach it. And it's going to mean changing our education as well, because I have a feeling that at some point we're actually going to have to tell patients, we need your consent for your tissue sample. But after that, the data's gone and it's out. And maybe you have a right to understand what's happening with it, but unlike under the Data Governance Act, you don't actually have a full right to withdraw your data from these researches. So it's to be frank, I mean, it was quite shocking to understand the full implications of the European health data space. But on the other hand, I mean, obviously we're all here in the medical field and in research, and we understand that medical research is talking about saving lives. And we're talking about children with leukemia who maybe could, find a cure, or curing cancers or advanced detection, better patient outcomes. So when you put all of it together, I fully understand the kind of philosophy behind it, is that this is so important that waiting for consent to save someone's life is maybe not the right way to go. So this was the theory behind it. It remains to be seen kind of what actually in practice it ends up being. But as we saw with the NHS, when you go on a non-consent based approach, and then all of a sudden people find out that all of their data from all of their tissue samples is pretty much free to any researcher to use. And I think it could be quite a scandal. So I even told the DG Santé this, I said, listen, the public aspect of this, and going back to public education and awareness, just to close out, the public education part of this is the key. Because even for me as someone working in the medical field, if I suddenly found out that my medical data had been used without my consent, including genomic data, I would be quite upset. And so if it had been explained to me and I had the full education, I think it's a lot easier to have these systems and have them with less friction in terms of the population. But I really think from the educational standpoint, this is really what needs to happen. And it needs to be Europe-wide. I mean, as I mentioned yesterday, the European institutions' communications are not ideal. And you have to actually be in a hospital and have a tissue sample ready to be collected to understand, oh, there's biobanks. 99% of people don't even know what a biobank is. I would say it's even more than that, to be frank with you. So really, you have to be in that situation to then understand, oh, I need to give consent. I need to understand this. And I think, obviously, we need to do that. But a general public awareness approach, I think, is really, really necessary, especially, and as we talked about yesterday, as we move towards a digitization of our healthcare. This changes the patient experience, it changes what's happening behind the scenes, and people really need to understand what their medical data value is, and especially with biobanking samples, which are even more as a hot topic or a point of contention. The public awareness and public education for me is absolutely the key to making all of this work. So it's a very interesting time. We have an amazing amount of innovation happening. We have an amazing amount for potential for innovation based on our medical data, including biobanking data. We have personalized medicine, instant feedback on real-time streams of data. All of this is, as we talked about yesterday, leading us towards a Star Trek-like futuristic ability to detect disease early, diagnose, make treatments, do robotic surgeries, perhaps one day 3D print custom drugs on the spot. I mean, we kind of are moving towards these technologies, and once we hit quantum computing and these algorithms are running at the speed of light, this will all happen a lot faster. So we are really on the precipice of an incredible amount of innovation. But when it comes to consent and data and privacy, as well as the legislative and the technological aspects, there's a lot of work to be done. And I think, perhaps I said the same thing yesterday, but I think only working together and having our standard operating procedures and agreeing on them, and being able to say, yes, this is how it is. And perhaps we just need legislation to say, if you're a biobank, if you're a hospital, this is the format you use. End of story. Because I'm not sure, looking at all the different hospitals, and of course it's not homogenous across Europe. Some are going to be quite advanced, maybe some less advanced. Some are maybe still using Windows 98 on their computer. Who knows? But I think from a legislative point of view now, we just need to simply say standardization is legally required if you were to operate. And here's why, and to explain even to the hospitals why it's so important, who maybe don't understand even themselves the value and the importance of their data when it's in an interconnected pan-European system. So that is my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for this enthusiastic presentation and also for your enthusiasm. Thank you very much. I ask the audience whether there are questions. Questions from the audience?
Marco.
Okay,
I have actually
researcher of
several questions for you later on. Huh?
Okay, okay.
So, Marco, yes.
I'm a researcher of Syllab SDN. A question related to the federated approach. As also yesterday we saw bring code to the data, and for me I fully agree on the advantage of federated approach, but I wonder what are the drawbacks of federated approach with respect to centralized one. If any, I think that, for instance, I have to engage the ICT department of each institution, for instance, but I'm interested to know what are the critical points.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I mentioned briefly one of the main ones is synchronization between all of these different things, and being able to ensure, as we know, each hospital will have a different IT system. There's not any homogeneousness between all of these. And so a big issue with the federated approach is actually just getting everyone on the same system and introducing this new technology and, changing the mentality, even from like the IT perspective of the people who are in the hospitals running their IT system, understanding that, no, you can't just wake up and say, hey, this is a better way to do our database system, so I'm going to change something. And so really like that is one of the main issues with any new technological adoption, is getting to people throw away the old ways and adopt the new ways. So I would say adoption from the human aspect is really the main issue. And then I think also it's a matter of, as you said, do you go to every single healthcare institute, or I think we have to do it from a bigger perspective. So as I said, like with the legislation, I think we simply need to say, here is the system and you have to use it. Because the main issue to the federated or decentralized approach is this human element of adopting new technology. I think the other very interesting thing as well, when we talk about decentralization, obviously in Europe we have maybe a little bit more chance to have common laws between the countries, but decentralization is cross-border data transfer. And this means every country that it goes to may have slightly different laws or as of right now, slightly different procedures. And so the harmonization of that is very important. And then of course, as we know, with GDPR, sending data to America is problematic. And so for a pan-European system, the federated approach makes absolute sense. But then when you start to talk about, decentralization globally, we're now sending data to countries that don't have the same maybe legal protections or the same procedures to what can be used with the data, et cetera. And so that's really a big thing is, a big concern is making sure that if we're going to have decentralized approach, every node in this decentralized network must be, able to talk to each other legally as well. So definitely, again, I think the technological and the legislative issues really could fix any of the issues that could potentially come from it, because the technology itself is fantastic and it makes sense. Also for healthcare, as we know, I'm not sure if you remember a few years ago with the ransomware attacks on hospitals, which would lock down their server and encrypt it, and you'd have to pay hackers, Bitcoin to unlock it, all this stuff. So the other issue with centralized approach is that you have a central source of data, and if that source goes offline or is attacked or you lose it, all of a sudden you no longer have the ability to actually access the data. So I know you didn't ask this, but another benefit to the federated decentralized approach is multiple copies of the data, to where there's no one point of weakness, and it's anti-fragile in that sense. But yes, so federated approach, I think, is definitely the best one. But we have human obstacles to overcome primarily, and then some technological obstacles in terms of adoption, where I think we just need to legislatively say, this is how it is. This is the standard technological system for healthcare data in Europe. If you're a hospital, will help. It's going to have to be subsidized. It's going to have to, both in terms of money and time, from the government, I think. But this, for me, is the only way to go. So hopefully I answered your question.
Thank you. Thank you.
You are muted, Professoressa. We cannot hear you.
Now, thank you, David. Now I want to welcome Begonia Escalera. I have several questions for you, David, but I will save this question for at the end of the presentations, because now I want to give the floor, since time is running, to Begonia Escalera, and then we will have time to discuss more about what you call donation of data. I question about donation, but we will discuss this later. Begonia, welcome. I'm also online. Begonia, I'm sorry. I got COVID a few days ago. Begonia has a long experience in the field of patient and family participation in research initiative. As a personal history, as caregiver, and we are very happy to have Begonia with us, and I will give the floor to Begonia for her presentation. Begonia, can you share your screen, please?
Yes, good morning to everybody, and thank you so much for the invitation to be today with all of you. Let me know if you can see my slides. It's working?
Yes, it's working. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. As it has been presented, my area of expertise is involving children and young people and families in different activities and projects, and obviously basic research and the biobank is one of the areas in which we work in our institution. I'm working as a patient engagement and research coordinator at Javel Children's Hospital, and this is the largest pediatric hospital of our country. Specifically, the department that I'm leading has the mission to ensure that all the projects in which our institution is involved or is the leader has this patient-centric approach. And for this, the only way that we know is to work hand by hand and directly and with a very close collaboration with children, young people, and families, with parents. To do this, it's really important to take into account two approaches. One is the ethical approach, because they are minors and we need to protect them in all the activities that we do. And the second approach that we need to take into account is the children's rights, because usually we have protected them to be involved in research as participants, but also as advisors of research. And we have from 1929 the Conventions of the Rights of the Children, with the endorsement of the United Nations and UNICEF, that establish that any decision in regards of the health of children requires to involve them in the discussions, and also they have the right to express their opinions. And considering this, what we do is to translate these principles to the field of research and specifically to the patient involvement activities. And for us, we don't envision, any activity of designing research for children without considering their participation or the participation of the parents. Since this, what we have in our institution is a big plan, a big strategic plan to support all the different departments and professionals working in research to ensure this patient centricity that I already mentioned. This plan covers from the basic research and the biobank of our institution, all the activities that we do in regards to clinical research. We have a specific pillar, an area in which we work with collaborative research projects based in the data donation, because as you know, pediatric conditions mainly are rare diseases, and some of them are really unknown for us. And we work with patients and families to collect information that can help us to know better these diseases and to describe the natural history and other areas of the disease. And also we work a lot involving patients and families in the field of innovation. For us, is innovation also a cross-cutting topic that beyond the design of specific digital solutions for health requires to have this approach in the other areas, from basic research to clinical research. And we work anytime that it's possible with patients, but also obviously with parents, because in some conditions it's really hard for the condition per se or for the age of the patients to involve them directly. This is the strategic plan that I mentioned. We have a planification of activities from this year, 2022, and for the upcoming 3 years. This plan was reviewed and has the endorsement of our board, and now we are now in the process to implement different activities to the different departments of our institute. Something that's important that you know is that this plan covers different dimensions of working, very close with patients, families, and also patients' organizations. And it's important to have clear definition of key terms. One is the engagement, that basically is related to the information that we provide in terms to make accessible research and to disseminate research to the citizens and obviously to the patients. Involvement specifically refers to the members of patients' communities that they are active in our projects and they provide opinions and they contribute in co-designing some parts of our scientific projects. And it's important to clarify that for us, participation as a term refers specifically to the patients that they are involved as a participant in a clinical research study. Said this, also, it's key and meaningful to work in advocacy and awareness activities, because I remember years ago that when I explained that we have a scientific youth council in our hospital, in conferences or in clinical sessions, sometimes the people were surprised thinking that this is not feasible because they are children, they don't know anything about science, and how you are going to have, for example, a discussion about a clinical trial protocol. This is feasible, but obviously we need to do it with the right means and the right expertise. And it's really key to explain that the children, in this case, the minors, they have rights to be involved, and we need to provide the right activities for them. Said this, these plans, as I have mentioned, cover the whole process from the basic research to the final outcomes of a clinical trial. And in every of these steps, always there is an opportunity to involve children and parents. And this is the main role that we have: assess the different professionals, the different departments, and the different stakeholders that we collaborate with them to see where we can involve the patients and the parents, which methodology that we can use, and how we report these outcomes, and see how we can improve this specific phase of the research cycle. Said this, and in regards involving patients and talking about specifically as an example of the drug development process when we do clinical trials, in this slide you can see plenty of opportunities, plenty of activities where we can involve the patients and the parents. There is an initial phase that it's in regards the awareness about we need more clinical research in pediatrics, but also to identify unmet medical needs and potential research questions that probably from the patient's perspective, from the parent's perspective, are really important, but probably never we consider them from the scientific perspective. Also, we can involve them in the design, but also in the recruitment strategies, in the review of any document or material that we bring to the patients, from the assent or the consent or educational booklets. And something that is really meaningful work with the patients is in regards of the retention strategies, because in some projects we involve the participants of the clinical trials for many years, and they grow up and they don't have the same expectations or the same needs that they had at the beginning of the project. And in the follow-up, and something that is really important when we involve patients and parents, is to provide at the end of their contributions the feedback about the impact that they did helping us to do better research. We have different ways to involve patients. One is the ad hoc groups of patients and caregivers, because if we need to provide feedback in a specific scientific protocol, in a scientific material that it's focused disease, what we do is to set up specific groups of patients and parents to do these activities. For example, in the case of clinical trials, what we do is to create a patient advisory board, the PAP, that we incorporate the feedback and contributions when the discussions about the project are start, when we have a draft of the protocol, but along the whole process until this clinical trial is finished, and we need to deliver the last summary with the results of this study. We have also other ways to involve patients. One is the Kids Barcelona group. The Kids Barcelona group, The Kids Barcelona group is our youth scientific council. We have nowadays 20 young people in this group. 80% of them are patients and 20% of them are healthy ones. It's important for us to have this minimum of healthy young people in the group because they provide the fresh air and the perspective of people that probably at some point of the teenagers' ages, they have the onset of the disease. This group receives training because the school is not covering any content in regards clinical research, basic research, and also focused on pediatrics. And we have monthly meetings with them to review and validate some specific projects that are feasible to be discussed in these sessions with young people, healthy and with different diseases. Are general activities, and you will see afterwards some examples. And we have the same version with parents. We have the Kids Parents Group. It's formed with 10 different parents of our institution. Some of them, they have expertise in clinical trials, and they have a kid with a condition in different medical departments that are the ones that they perform more research in our institution. We have parents of kids with oncology diseases, neurology diseases, mental condition, etc. And also we have a group of ambassadors that they help us in any activities that we do with the objective to disseminate and to educate our patients in clinical research. They are volunteers of our institution. We have for all our activities 400 volunteers that they come every day to the hospital and they help in many, many activities. And from this group of volunteers, we have selected the ones that they have scientific background because they are teachers or they have been working in research, that they help us in these activities that I mentioned we do to disseminate our research projects. In regards of these other groups of patients and parents that I already mentioned, we work with all the therapeutic areas in pediatrics and also pregnant women because we are a maternity hospital. Also in some therapeutic areas in adults, because nowadays in some clinical research projects, even the main target is the adult population, we are allowed to include adolescents. And also what we do is to work in some initiatives with an international perspective, because not always it's meaningful to involve patients from only one country. And we have the capability working together with other colleagues from other pediatric hospitals across Europe and beyond to work in parallel with the same advisory activities with patients and parents. In regards of the methodologies that we use to involve patients and caregivers, we have expertise working with focus groups, the Delphi method, questionnaires, interviews, the patient journey, that this is a nice activity to get the baseline about what is the experience of patients and parents living 24 hours, 7 days per week with a specific pediatric condition. Also advisory boards, the steering committees or community advisory boards. And also we are working with a very innovative methodology that is simulation. Simulation is to do the replication of the real world of some specific moments or phases of a clinical research project that we replicate in a specific environment. In some cases, when it's not ethical to have patients or parents on board, we have actors. We replicate this specific moment, for example, the consent process, the administration of a complex treatment. We record everything and we analyze afterwards if something requires to be improved, if we need to adjust any specific step of the process, etc. And for all of these activities, in some cases, we can do it virtual, face-to-face only, such as the case of simulation, or blended because we are working in these projects that I mentioned with this international perspective. And every activity is face-to-face at local level, but at the end we work together with virtual patients advisory boards. The close collaboration with patients organizations is really key for us. We have a dedicated department in our institution that has close contact with more than 100 organizations working with pediatric diseases. And it's really meaningful, no, to involve them in the projects and in the activities that we do. Also, for us, it's important to do training to the patients, but also to the staff, because I mentioned, no, that the patients or the parents, they don't have scientific background. The young people, obviously, because in the school, no, we are not teaching about this. But the same in regards of the staff, because the staff, they are scientific experts, but sometimes they don't know how, no, to approach the patients, how organize these activities, and it's important to explain to them that there is a new way, no, a new paradigm to do clinical research, basic research, and innovation that it's not with this very close collaboration and the involvement of patients. And we have in our institution, in the internal training program, regular sessions and courses for the staff to teach them about how they can involve the patients in their projects. And for the patients, the same. We have dedicated training for patients, in this case for kids, to prepare them for their involvement in our activities. Another area that this strategic plan is covering is research, specifically in the field of patient involvement, because this is a very innovative activity. We need to do always with a very scientific approach. Even it's more close to qualitative research, it's important to design these activities with the right methodology, collect the information, report this information, and analyze the impact. And for example, for the case of simulation that I mentioned, that it's really innovative, we don't know any other institutions working with simulation, specifically in clinical trials. What we did was to work with a case study that is going to be published in a journal in a few months, analyzing how we can do it better, which is the impact of the simulation in clinical research, in order to disseminate this expertise in the scientific community. Beyond this, we involve patients and families in activities that allow us to design educational materials and resources for our patients and our families. And here in the slide, you have two examples of resources that we co-created with patients and parents for our clinical research unit. In this side of the screen, the left side, you can see a toolkit that we refer with the name Welcome Kit, in which we offer to all the patients and all the families the same level of information when they start their participation in a clinical trial. We saw that it depends on the sponsor, and when the study is academic, we have obviously less resources. We saw that the information that we bring to the families is really different, and some questions or needs are rise along the time that they participate in the study. And what we did was to design this kit, in which we offered a booklet with the information about the clinical research unit of the hospital, which is the staff that is involved, what is a clinical trial, the design of a clinical trial, what is the placebo, what are your rights, and what are your commitments when you participate in a clinical study. Also, we design a patient diary that you can see here in the middle of this photo, to help the families and the patients to report information between the different medical appointments. And we have a small piece of gamification that is this passport that helps us to anticipate what is going on in the next medical visit, if the patients are going to participate in a specific medical procedure. And also, when the visit is finished and we have performed the different medical procedures, we put like a sticker and a stamp to the kids, and they realize that at least this part of the long journey to be involved in a clinical research, it's done. And the second example is how we finish the process to participate in a clinical trial with the patients and the families. The name of this initiative is the Bye-Bye Kit. We refer internally with this name, and we bring, in this case, the last visit of a clinical trial. We bring to the patients and to the families a photo of the kid with the study nurse that has been for all the time with the family in this frame, and also a thank you letter for the contribution to the specific research project. In regards of collective intelligence research methodologies, we do research with 2 different platforms nowadays, and I have listened just when I connected to the session that you were discussing about health data. In some cases, the contribution that the patients and the families they do to research, it's not only to provide advice about the research question, their needs, etc. They are co-researchers with us because they provide to us data to be analyzed and to know better these conditions. I referred previously about the need that we have to know the natural story of these diseases, but also in some cases we need to collect information about quality of life, patient-reported outcomes, and other kind of data. In regards of this, we have 2 platforms. One is the Share for Rare project that is focused in rare diseases, in which we have this donation of data and we deliver reports to the research community and patients and families about the different initiatives. And also nowadays we have a new project that is granted by the EIT Health, that the name is Science for Pandemics, that help us to do citizen science project with teenagers, specifically about pandemics and infectious diseases. Other examples of activities that we have done with patients and families in our institutions, it's the design of a flyer to the Biobank. For us, it's sometimes not easy to get samples from healthy kids to be used as a control group. And in this sense, we have designed a flyer to explain about this need that we have. And basically, we are offering this information in some specific medical departments that we know that the kids that they come, they don't have a chronic condition and that it's feasible to donate samples. But also in the case that we have, samples from patients and we can use the excellent. We have created educational games to introduce to the field of clinical research to the young people, but also in the case of the Science for Pandemic project to educate them in the prevention and in the management of pandemics. We have created awareness campaigns with patients and families, and we do plenty of activities with the schools. For example, the 23rd of November, we are going to perform the edition number 7 of an annual meeting that we have with the students of high schools to approach them to the research that we do in pediatrics. Every year we choose different topics. We have covered the topic about basic research and sample donations in a previous edition. And this year we are going to work specifically in neurology condition and also the importance for these diseases of medical devices. And finally, highlight again that everything about the involvement of children and young people in science, it's a right. We have this convention that I mentioned at the very beginning of the United Nations with endorsement of UNICEF, that in the case of children that they don't have, any approved treatment, and the only opportunity that we have to bring to them is clinical trials, clinical research. What we do is to try to translate this right to express their opinion that this is the consent process, or to receive the best standard of care that it's research, to translate these articles from this convention to this new interpretation and the meaning about that there is a right also to participate in science and to be involved in research. And this is all from my side. I'm open to answer any questions or comments. Thank you so much.
Begonia, thank you very much for your presentation and for sharing with us your experience and the work that you are doing in the foundation and at the hospital. Very interesting. I think that Peppino Mirabelli can learn from you a lot. Peppino is one of the speakers. You were not present. I mean, he is working at the Children's Hospital Santo Bono in Napoli. He joined this hospital very recently, I mean, a few months ago, and previously he was the supervisor of the biobank in a research institutions, the SynLab SDN institution in Napoli. And now he's starting the biobanking activity also in the Santo Bono Hospital. So thank you very much. So first of all, I want to ask the audience whether there are questions. I see there are no questions from remote, but I want to know whether There are questions from the...
Hello. Yes, that's me again. Begonia, I don't know if you were connected before, just in case. So I'm Anne-Sophie Grell. I work at the Hospital Clinic of Barcelona under the supervision of Dr. Escarabil. So it's a pleasure to meet you. I hadn't had the opportunity to meet you in Barcelona yet. Personally, I always look up to the Hospital Sant Joan de Déu for the work that you do on the field of patient experience and also on PPI, as you just presented. So it was, I think it's very nice, everything that you're doing, and for sure we can learn a lot from your experience. So I had, two questions, and the first one is, you presented your strategic plan on PPI within your hospital. I was wondering if it's a public resource, if we can access that, or if it's internal. Okay.
Yes, it's internal because it's the general outline. It's what I explained in the presentation, and I can send you. We can have a meeting if you want face-to-face in Barcelona, but it's an internal document because we refer specifically to the departments that we have and the commitments that are behind of these 10 points that I briefly explain about training. It's adapted to our institution, and it's an internal document. But I can explain you in a meeting if you want more detail.
Well, thank you
And
for
maybe, Begonia, you can also share your slides with the participants of the workshop.
Yes, I can send it.
Well, thank you very much. And the second question was to learn just a bit more from an organizational point of view, for how long you've been working in Sant Joan de Déu, and for how long you've existed on the side of the health research, but also on the side of the healthcare. I don't know if you are in contact with the people also working on patient experience. And this is, of course, out of my, let's say, personal interest, professional interest at the hospital clinic, but just, to understand a bit more, so this cultural change and that is expressed with the existence of your team. So for how long you've been there, and how many people you're working in the unit?
Yeah, the patient experience department, it's in the context of our hospital, because their activity is healthcare, everything, in regards to healthcare and the hospital per se. In our institution, everything is patient-centric. Even if we need to design a new facility like the cafeteria and the new ICU, whatever, everything is cooperated with patients and families. And I think that more or less they set up the department at the same time that I did. I'm working in the research foundation, not in the hospital, but we are, sister organizations, and we are working for 10 years ago in the field. We work with many initiatives that help us to create frameworks, tools, and resources, because work with children, I don't know your background and the area in which you work in clinic, it's focused in pediatrics, but it's so different than when you work with adults. And we have created educational programs, resources, frameworks to analyze the impact of PPI activities for many years, and with a lot of collaborative projects, because pediatric clinical research doesn't happen in only one hospital. It happens, in many other hospitals, and we used to collaborate with other colleagues. And what we realize is that there are many initiatives and projects that are not, international, that are done only with our patients and our clinicians. And this is mainly the reason to have this strategic plan, and also to help, to this change in the cultural mindset of the whole institution, because it's not only about the researchers, that they usually work with patients, organizations, and families for many years, but at the end we need to have on board all the people in the organization to support the patient involvement activities. Human resources, yes, because they need to include in the training plan of the staff of the institution, the courses that we do for professionals and families, the colleagues working with the European grants, because you know that nowadays it's a must to include the patient involvement in research projects. And this strategic plan is working with all the departments, the ethics committee, and we realize that we need to do even more internally also than the activities that we were done in collaboration with other hospitals. It's a big plan, and it works with all the different departments, not only the medical departments.
This is a very good example of good practice, actually, in the healthcare and specifically for children. Are there any other questions from the audience? Yes, Peppino.
Thanks for your presentations. It is very, very useful for me for what I'm going to do in the Naples Children's Hospital. What is your experience about reconsent procedures? It is very, very nice what you do now with the educational program, the patient engagement, involvement. So in the case of reconsent, what can you tell us?
Yeah, what we do is involve, the patients and the parents in any documents that we address to the participants of our projects. We have a guidance. I can send the resources and the organization can circulate to everybody that we did many years ago, collecting recommendations in terms of the content and the format, in this case from young patients. Because the issue that we have is that we receive very, very long documents, in some cases 30 pages. The kids, they don't read these documents, they don't understand, and at the end, the consent or the reconsent process, it's a process. It's key to have the right information in the document with the right format, but also to deliver this information in the right environment. And we created this guidance. Nowadays, it's in the recommendations of the Spanish Regulatory Agency. When a sponsor, an academic institution, is working with a research project targeted for pediatric patients, please take into account these recommendations. And also nowadays we are working in projects in regards to electronic assent or consent, because everybody is talking about this, but we are managing at this moment more than 200 pediatric clinical trials in our institution, and none of them have used this kind of format or the tool. And what we have seen when we have had meetings with vendors is that initially what they offer is a digital copy of the paper copy format, and for us the consent is a process, and we need to take advantage of the multimedia format to do better this consent or reconsent process, because it's not only to provide the info, it's probably you have questions, comments, you can put videos, animations, or many other resources to make it more accessible for the children. Yeah, we have a lot of experience on this. Also, there is a guidance from the Imprima, the European Medicines Agency Pediatric Networks, that collects some recommendations according to the age group, because what we need to face in pediatrics, and probably you are obviously aware, is that in each European country, the age in which is mandatory the assent is different. And according to the age of the young patients or the children, it is recommendations from EMA offer the minimum of information or the maximum of information that we need to bring to them.
Personally, I believe that the future is the electronic consent, the digitalization, as Dinit told us. Also, young children and young adults are smarter than my generation, for example, because they were born in the era of the digitalization. So I believe in this way to have the consent for the patient and in these modalities. Thank you again.
Indeed, also, if I comment, in Italy, we got a very important grant for the strengthening of the infrastructure of biobanking, and we are planning, starting from next year, to develop a digitalized electronic informed consent.
Wow.
And this could be with the personal identifiers for the participant. This is very important, as you said, either for information, and also we also think that consent is a process, the digitalizing for consent will also help very much the research, not only the healthcare system, but also the research, because you have the possibility to recontact easily the patients and the researchers, and the possibility to recontact the patient for any further research. and also the patient can exercise their rights of withdrawal more easily, to be informed about the research results and to be informed about the incidental findings. And therefore, we think that benefiting of these tools and technologies could be very important. I also want to share with all of you the fact that in Italy we developed a matrix for informed consent for adults and recently also for children. The previous speaker talked about a module, talk about a module for consent. My view, our view, and also our experience is that is not true that one module fits all the research project. I mean, what is more useful is to have a matrix containing all the issues that needs to be included in the consent, and to make a tailored consent for each type of research project that is needed by the participants. I also would like to question. I think that we should stop using donation when we talk about samples of data. And the reason is because donation implies that we have donated, you have no rights anymore on the object that you donate. While according to the GDPR, the withdrawal at any time is a right of the patient. So we should start to think about a different approach. And indeed, there is the need of a change of culture, and therefore engagement, involvement of patients and citizens and the public is important, and it is important the training all together, because training is not only related to the patient that needs to have insights on the scientific issues, but also on the researchers and clinicians that are involved in the research, because they need to understand how to approach the patients and the citizens, the public in general, and they need to learn also about the methodologies.
Just to respond, if I may, what's been really interesting for us actually, as we're in Polish hospitals and currently collecting digital consents, this question of data donation. So I agree that it's not the perfect term, but we're actually finding that the regional differences make a huge difference to the public perception. So some demographics, even within the same country, will actually respond to data donation because it makes them feel altruistic and like they're helping. But what we also notice is that using the word data is actually very problematic in Poland. And so when you ask people for their medical data, they start to think, oh, big data, government, analytics, and they get quite nervous. When you ask them to share their medical history, all of a sudden, twice as many people will sign up. So we're really finding that one word can make an absolute difference in people's willingness to participate. And absolutely, I think we do need to kind of revisit how we're approaching this from a linguistic point of view. Especially because in our system, actually, stakeholders are rewarded. So patients are actually tangibly rewarded for giving their data to the program. So it's not donation. And as you said, they can, of course, revoke consent at any time. So this is, I think, definitely an ongoing discussion, but something that's very interesting to see. Because if you go to Scandinavia, they don't have a problem with the word data, and 90% of people are willing to donate their data to science, and they don't have a problem. But if you go to Poland, and I think it might actually be attached a little bit to how much faith and confidence you have in your government of what they're going to do with this data, you actually see the regional differences on how people respond. Ben, just also to talk about this, or please, if you wanted to respond.
Well, in my experience, the majority of our patients and citizens are willing to share their data and samples and to make available for research. But the question is that they need and they should have the control out of these samples and data. So donation is really something that is not, is not a mistake. Yeah. Do you want to comment on this, Begonia?
Yeah, it's a topic in which everybody is talking because it's a power tool to do research. Sometimes we don't have samples of patients, and the goal for our research is data. from the patient perspective, what I need to say is that still we need to educate more the patients and the families, because they are not aware about the rights, the need of this data, and how this data is used. But obviously, it's really meaningful because we need patient registries, we need this data in some cases to be, to cross this information with the biological analysis of samples, or even with clinical imaging, that nowadays it's an interesting field to do research and diagnosis. From my side, I would suggest that we need to work with awareness campaign and education of the patient. And I fully agree, it's something that we need to do better research.
Yeah, and also I think that there is the need for kind of a pact, trust pact. We need trust.
Yeah.
Trust from the institution, trust from the citizen, the patients, and the clinician, and all the stakeholders involved. And we need to work towards this.
Yeah, there are initiatives about the implementation of the the blockchain methodology that ensures that everything is record and managed in the right way. But also you need to explain what means the blockchain methodology to the patient. And another topic that everybody is talking about, but I see that probably it's not feasible in a closed future, is interoperability, because already we have plenty of databases and systems, but it's complex to connect them. Even in one institution, we have plenty of different repositories of data. Imagine not to connect in the context of ERNs or other fields. Steps are, moving in this direction, and also for this, EU health data space. But probably we need more time and more resources, because the technology is not already, ready for this.
Just to build on that, so we are currently using blockchain technology in our consent system, and of course, explaining what it means to people is the hardest part. But it's actually a direct response. As we were setting up the system, the number one thing that people responded with was, well, how can I trust that my data is going to be used or not used based on what I've said? And so what we did is actually use blockchain technology, which is an open oracle. It is inspectable, and this is something the European Commission has recommended as a technology to be used, and we can actually legally and verifiably prove, mathematically prove, whether someone has given their consent or not. And it's an open source, or kind of an open database that anyone can check at any time. And we're actually finding, from the researcher's perspective, this is quite important, because they need provenance of data, and they need to be sure that they have the legal right to use that data. And using blockchain technology, it's a source of truth, and we can actually say, on the transaction, on the chain, you may verify this at any time, but it's also instantaneously up to date. So the second, at least from our system, the second someone revokes consent to the use of their data, they're no longer included in the output of our funnel, and that really happens to the second. So the technologies are nascent, and they're quite new, but we're already using them and finding that they are solving the issues of trust, accountability, transparency, legal provenance of data. These things are now, at least from our perspective and in our experience in our system, questions of the past. Now it's about adoption and education, and explaining why these tools are so important and why they do solve patient concerns regarding privacy and transparency.
Thank you for this comment. And now I want to give the floor to Giusy Esposito. She got some question from the audience.
Yes, we have a question from the public online, from Barbara D'Alessio. She would like to ask the speakers, all the speakers, I think, whether they use different strategies to involve healthy people than patients. And the second question is, to what extent they partner with patient organizations in defining their biobanking strategies. So
Yes. First question, we work a lot with the schools, because it's where the young people is, and we do awareness campaign, the regular meetings. We have educational toolkits to explain that we need to do research with young people, even if you are healthy, because we need these control groups, or even to collect information about initiatives linked to health promotion projects. This is for us the main target, or the main way in which we work with healthy young people. And for the second one, in our institution, the department that I mentioned that we refer with the name Patients Organizations area, they support meetings with patients organizations at national and international level with our researchers. And it's the right opportunity that sometimes we have to collect samples of these patients. When we do these meetings, we prepare these families in advance and we said, okay, we are building a biobank for your condition. If you are interested, please come 2 hours before the meeting because there is the moment to collect blood samples or any other kind of samples that we can collect at this moment. Or even we do this after the meeting because our biobank is in close collaboration with other biobanks at national level, and they can send to us specific samples that require, another process to be collected and the fast process of a blood test. And these meetings with patients organizations also it's the right moment not only to update them about that, the research that has been done until this moment to explain, future initiatives and to work also in this culture that they need to have about the importance to donate, to share with us samples of the patients.
Yes, also in the case of healthy controls, it's frequent that the control is a familiar, a brother or a sister of the child. But I believe that, as Begonia told, education is very, very important. The education with school, education inside the hospital, it is very important to speak with the parents, to speak with the patients, and to have a team dedicated to the research and to the biobank. This is critical for engaging patient and to increase the viability of the samples and the sample types included in a biobank.
Yeah, if I may, I have to fully agree with this. I mean, what's really interesting is we're in hospitals and asking people to contribute their data. We hear so often, typically from younger people, but also from just all demographics, well, why would you need my data? I'm not sick. And they don't actually understand the need for control data and to be able to have that baseline. And so it is absolutely a matter of education. And I think even going one step further, we're talking about patient organizations and stuff like that. But for me, I believe it's bigger than that. I see it more as a civic duty, and like donating blood or something like that. It's something that is, for all of us, a civic duty. And so I think, as you mentioned, being in schools, I remember being on I was born in '87. I grew up in schools where we didn't have computers or laptops and we weren't even allowed them. And then I look at a generation maybe 3 or 4 years after me who are actually being taught coding in classes, and its digitization is now very much in classrooms. And I think that part of, let's say, the more general education on data and the importance of data needs to happen in schools. And I think a big portion of that would be understanding also medical data. So just thinking if we could have this sort of educational program in schools rather than waiting for people to come to hospitals, maybe they're sick, maybe they're just accompanying someone. But if you were in schools actually telling people about the importance of data, how medical research works, and how, as a civic duty, you could actually be part of what we're calling more citizen science or decentralized science. These are terms that I didn't grow up with, decentralized science or citizen science. These are terms that have been coming up over the last maybe 10 years. So I think that there's a lot of cultural elements that are primed and in place. We just need that really broad educational push beyond patient organizations, beyond having chats in hospital waiting rooms or in the examination room, and really go further out into greater society to talk about it as a public service or as a civic duty, like voting or anything else.
I fully agree with you. To promote the citizens science, citizenship science is very important. There are other comments from the audience, question for the speakers. Not. Let me ask Begonia and also the other speakers, what they think about the implementation of the GDPR. GDPR is the framework, the legal framework adopted by all the countries in Europe, and actually in each country there are also some specific rules, and the GDPR makes the framework for for the protection of data. So, do you see any limitation or support from this specific legal framework, Begonia?
Yeah, what we have seen in different projects in regards data in our hospital is that when you explain to the family, in this case, because are the parents the ones that are involved, the need to get data from them, the rights that they have, where is this data storage, if they want to use the right to delete this information, when they are educated, they understand the value and also they trust. And I think that it's also a matter of the different institutions that we are collecting this information to explain them that there is this regulation at the European level and to educate them in everything about health data. Because usually they are not going to go to read the regulation. It's complex also, and what we need to do is working activities about health literacy in data. Because also it's not something that nobody is working on this. It's a high value for us, and we need to do it in the right manner. When we explain that everything is secure, that they have rights, etc., they don't have any problem to send us this information. And in some conditions, when they are desperate and they want, to get in contact with other families and with the same phenotype of the disease, I have seen that families share this very sensible information even in the social media. And I think that when they donate or they share data to health institutions, this is part of the trust exercise because it's not the same, you donate information to a company. And in this case, also it's our responsibility to explain in the right way what is behind of the use of the data. And also it's the same about when they share samples, the consent process. Make it with the right friendly language that they can understand what is going on with the data that they share with us.
I completely agree with you. One thing is that with the GDPR is, I can say, on the shoulder of the patients, the responsibility of through the consent. Yeah, of so it's transferred from the researchers to the patient or citizens, the responsibility of taking the decision, and now I think that this is important because at the end the samples and data are of the patient, are not of the hospitals, are not of they belong not from the hospitals or from the researchers, but they are definitely on the patients. But researchers need to understand that this is a great responsibility put on the shoulders of the patients, and they need to help in having them well understand the process, the research, and so the information part is very important. Any other question from the young people that I can see in the audience? Peppino has another question.
I want just to make a comment. I believe that GDPR educated the researchers, the clinicians, on how to approach to the patient about their privacy, their rights. And now is the moment that patients believe in, are conscious of their data and the importance of their data, and what can we do with the information that they provide us. So I believe it is a great goal at the European level.
Very important, yes. Any comment from the audience? I'm sorry that I'm not there to make more alive the discussion, but I I really wish to have some comment from the audience present in the room.
Okay, no comment in the room. And
No comment in the room, no comment from the young people on these tools and technologies that are available. No comments on the importance of being participant of the research process. I want to ask the audience whether they had chance to be involved in a research process, not as researchers, but as participant. And in case not, if they will be willing to do it.
I feel young, but I'm not young. But I have just.
Who is speaking? I cannot see who is speaking.
Okay, I'm Marco.
Marco.
Marco Aiello. Okay,
Yes.
Mia. And
Still young, still young.
yes. No, in the recent working group of BBMRI, I attended to the last working group about the issues related to the privacy regulatory issues in Italy. One comment for me was very interesting. One of the participants, I don't remember the name, said that as a participant in a research, she was, I think, a patient affected by cancer in her medical history. She want not to be contacted for further research, since for her this should be would be traumatic to be recontacted by research, and this is important in my opinion, since also all our solutions, also dynamic consent, involve a recontact to the patients, but at my knowledge, no solutions consider this kind of problem.
Yeah, thank you for this comment. I mean, the actual regulation implies that we can, at least in Italy, we cannot ask for a broad consent to the patient. Means, to give consent for the use of their samples and data for future research, but we have to contextualize the type of research that we are going to do. And therefore, when you collect and save samples in a biobank, it can happen that after a few years or months or years, whatever, a new research area can be open, and therefore there is the need or the possibility to use that samples and data for other type of research. But it's also a right, yes, of the patient not to be recontacted, and this is included in the GDPR. I mean, the right to be contacted or to recontacted or not. We will discuss this issue with the Garante at Italian level. For sure, at least the type of research that should be defined in the consent, not maybe specifically, but at least the type. And in the case of the patient will opt for not be recontacted, the rule is that you have to inform the ethic committee to ask for the approval and then to ask the permission to the Garante. So the process is there. I mean, if the patient, is not is not opting for a reconsent, there are other organs and organisms that can allow the research to go on. Bigoni, you want to comment?
Just from a technological point of view, perhaps it's my age, but I really don't see the issue here. I mean, the way that I view it automatically is if you have an app or a website, you just have bars that you would check, like on your phone when you're changing settings on your phone. Would you like to donate your general medical data? Would you like to donate your, can we use your medical data? Can we use your biobanking data? Can we contact you about the studies that you may participate in? These are all things that we could dynamically, just from an app point of view, honestly, it would take a few days to code, and then it would dynamically present them with the necessary consent forms and perhaps even dynamically present them with the necessary information for them to then give informed consent. The question is, do we have the processes? And as you said, some we do, but it needs to then be respected universally. And so I think that it really, as I said before, the way that I view it, we're working on our own solution. Other companies and other hospitals and organizations have their solutions. At the end of the day, I'm okay with government mandated technological solutions that are interoperable, that work, or even if it's just a language or a framework like API, which allows different servers to talk to each other universally around the world. We have these technologies. So for me, the technological aspects are really, really not so hard to get around from an actual end user point of view. And this is really, for me, I spent a lot of time thinking about adoption and how we can get these technologies and these new concepts out into the general public. And the answer is just make it as easy as possible. That means, easy to understand education, as we've talked about, forms with simple language that normal people can understand. If biobanking is a new word for them, we need to have that in our context when we're writing 30-page consent forms related to biobanking data. So making it easy for me is the way to go, and I think technology is pretty much there to be able to do that.
Yeah, we all agree. We all agree on this, and as I said, we are developing this technology also in Italy, and therefore all our biobanks will have the opportunity to use the digitalized informed consent. But even using the digitalized informed consent that make things more easy, we need to inform patients, and the patient still have the right of saying, I don't want to make this click. Yeah, I don't want to be recontacted for making other consent. So this is a right of the patients, and therefore there are other type of approach to be followed in order to proceed with the research. That's it. But you're right, and we will go for in this way. I mean, to make things more easy and friendly, because using the technologies, as you said, it is possible to adopt more fit for purpose type of information, fit for not only for the purpose of the research, but also for the kind of people that you are approaching according to the age, according to the cultural status, and so on. So this is very important, and we rely on technologies. We are not against the technologies. We want to to promote technologies, but still, I mean, we need to adhere with the ethical and ethical principles and legal requirements. Bigoni, you want to comment?
No, only comment what the other speaker said. We have the technology for these platforms that already mentioned, with the checkbox about if they want not to be recontacted, and also we have in place the process of the reconsent, because initially they give us data with an initial proposal, and if probably with this data we can do other research project, we need to follow the right process to reconsent them about the issue, and we have this on place. And it's not only, as the other speaker said, the technology is about how we explain to them, because in some cases, if also this electronic consent in these platforms where we collect the data, it's so long, so hard to be understood, we never get the people on board. And this is really important, and for this, you need to work very close, and this is how we do, with the DPO, the personal data officer of our hospital, and the ethics committee, because everything needs to have the approval of the ethics committee. And it's the right way, I think, to do it, work in parallel with the delegate of personal data and also the ethics committee to make accessible the informed consent process in these digital platforms. If not, it's challenging to get the people on board because people are scared and people don't read, and when they see, we have two behaviors. When they see a lot of information, they said directly yes because they don't matter about anything. But there are the people that they start to read, and when they see this complex information there, probably the answer is I don't want to consent.
There are other questions from the audience?
Yeah, so it just came to mind as you talked about these technological aspects and also the...
Can you present yourself, please?
Caterina Trenito, I'm a researcher at SynLab STN, working on medical imaging.
Good.
So just about this topic of the technological aspects and also user experience, you mentioned using an app. It came to my mind, so in the pandemic, right? All of us were implicitly, inadvertently turned into patients, and we were asked to give consent to, for example, to share our data if anyone was using the apps. So I lived in Germany at the time, but we haven't had an equivalent app where you could, inform if you had tested positive or, so there was this, also technologically, I think Apple and Google partnered up to create a exposure notification framework or something that technologically allowed to use Bluetooth technology and all sorts of stack to allow this large-scale tracking of contagion data, basically. So this was already, I think, it's exposed a lot of the public to this issue of using technology, giving consent, and also user experience. So how did the apps figure out how to present this information and sort of make it usable? So I wonder if there were any insights from that experience that came into your work, or there was any synergies to do with that.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, it was actually a fundamental part of why our organization launched when it did. We had the GDPR, which was a few years ago, the Data Governance Act, so the legislative framework was now starting to be implemented, but it was actually the social aspect of people now being used, as you said, we all became de facto patients, right? And we then suddenly got into this framework of understanding, and of course there's controversy about it, tracking and all this kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, we understood that we were actually actively in real time contributing to science and this sort of thing. So from the public point of view, there's also the zeitgeist of being anti-big tech and the Cambridge Analytica scandal I talked a little bit about yesterday. And so we're coming to this point as a society where we're understanding the power of digitization, the power of our data, but that also we can actively contribute. So for us, obviously the pandemic was and is awful, but it actually had some positive impacts, I think, in terms of people understanding that level of contribution. And you mentioned living in Germany. As far as I understand, the German app was actually one of the biggest digitization of medicine successes that we have so far.
Yes, there was definitely more of a bigger rollout and success than in Italy, as far as I know, in terms of numbers.
Yeah, no, for Europe in general, it absolutely was one of the leaders. But as you mentioned also, the actual phone manufacturers getting on board, it took weeks or a few months to figure this out. So we have the technology, we have the talent, the money is there, we have billions of euros floating around. It just needs that, to push it forward. But I think, the elements societally are there now. Anybody else would like to comment on that, or?
There are some cases, particular cases. For example, in the case of embryo cells, it's frequent that the parents don't want to be contacted for different issues linked to the initial health problem. So most embryos cannot be used because parents cannot be recontacted. So they are just stored in liquid nitrogen. So I don't know if anyone wants to comment also on this aspect.
This is a very special case, Peppino. You are talking about embryos produced for medical reasons, for in vitro
in vitro fertilization for
in vitro fertilization, and when they are not used for this purpose,
yeah.
you are saying that cannot be used for research, right?
Yes, yes, this is the topic.
Yeah, but this is a very special topic, also implying not only ethical and regulatory issues, but also religious issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if the parents, I mean, if I can say parents, did not give, I mean, the permission to use it, needs to be,
No way.
yeah.
No way. No way. They will be stored.
No one ethical committee or the Garante will allow to do research on the embryos.
They will be stored in liquid nitrogen for forever, probably. I don't know.
The question on the samples, there are questions. For instance, the biobank have the duty to not only to collect but also to store samples forever. And if a biobank, I mean, just close up, I mean, they need to transfer all the samples because there is no right to destroy the samples because samples are of the patients. And therefore, to destroy the samples, if this is not included, I mean, is the time frame of storage is not included in the informed consent, you are not allowed as biobanker to destroy the samples. These are the rules, at least in Italy.
I actually have a question related to that, and pardon my ignorance on that, but is there a right for your biobanking samples to be destroyed as a patient? Can you send them an email and say, please destroy all samples that you have of me currently?
Sorry, I did not get your question.
Do we have a system right now in Europe for a patient to contact the biobank that is storing their sample and say, please destroy my sample? So a right
Absolutely.
to be forgotten.
This is a right of the patient, not only, but if a patient decided to withdraw the consent to use their data, the biobank need to destroy also the samples, because samples and data are two faces of the same coin. Yeah, since out of the samples you can generate new data, so the biobank need to adhere to the indication of the patient and destroy not only, I mean, to destroy the data, I mean, not to use the data anymore, but also to destroy the sample.
But this is all within the context of the patient initiating it. So without that initiation, it kind of lives in perpetuity.
It depends on the consent. Sometimes in the consent form, there is the indication for how long the biobank is allowed and should store the samples. Can be 10 years, can be 20 years, or can be forever. If it's forever, the biobank is not allowed to destroy the sample. Begonia.
Interesting.
So,
Thank you for that.
I have to leave because there are people waiting for me in another meeting.
Thank you really for participating. We are waiting for your slides, and thank you really for the live discussion. And maybe this is also the occasion to start a collaboration between Italy and Spain more than there is at the moment. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
Bye. It happened that the biobank just, stop their work, and in this case, there is the need for another biobank to take care of all the samples, because samples are of the patients, and the patient have the right to have their samples stored somewhere. And there is the need to inform all the patients where the samples will be stored next. These are the rules according to the GDPR.
Okay, if there are not any questions or comments, okay. Okay, it's the time to the closing remarks. We are in time, perfectly in time. I will thank our speakers for the useful and interesting interventions. Thank you. And also thanks to Professoressa Maria Luisa for her participation despite the COVID. And also thanks all of you, all the audience online and in presence. Yes, we have finished. Also, I want to thank BioCheckup staff and this wonderful location, NAPAB, and also EIT Health again. Okay, thank you.
Thank you also from my side. I must say that I invite you that are in such a beautiful city and such a beautiful environment. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to chair this session and to learn from all of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.